Hello, and welcome to Hawaii Literacy's Parents Corner. Each week we'll be discussing different strategies, activities, and games you can play with your child if they are struggling to read. When your child or student reads aloud, you might notice that they come upon a word they don't know how to read. Sometimes they'll try sounding it out, maybe they'll guess at the word based on what they think it looks like, just skipping the reading the word altogether, or just get so frustrated that they just want to stop reading. During these moments, here are some good suggestions to help. It's a good rule of thumb to try about 2 of these suggestions before moving on. You don't want to dwell too long on the word and risk losing your child's interest or patience. So if your child is still struggling after trying some of these tips, maybe take note of the word and make a flashcard to review later with your child. And just remember, reading shouldn't be just about books. It's supposed to be fun too. So anytime you can incorporate games or activities or crafts, or just making a point to point out letters and signs when you're walking along the street, do it, because you want the kid to always be thinking about reading in words, but in a fun way and not just inside a book. When your child is struggling with a word, before jumping in and telling them the word, wait 5 seconds. You want to give them enough time to try decoding or sounding out the word themselves, but not too much time that they get frustrated and give up. I like to count to 5 Mississippi in my head, just so the child doesn't see me staring at a clock and feel the added pressure, but it also gives them enough time to kind of figure it out by themselves. And it's also good practice for me to see if I know how to spell Mississippi. Another tip is to use the pictures in the book to help the child guess what the word might be based on the image. Ask your child, what do you see in the picture? What do you think is happening in the story? Having your child focus on the picture is a great way to keep them curious about what they are reading and a helpful tool to look for context clues for words. Asking about the pictures in the book is also a good way to check your child's comprehension of the story. By asking the child what's going on in the picture, they can start to think critically about what is happening in the story. If while reading you notice your child has no idea what the word is, it's time to go back to basics and start with having them say the beginning sounds of the word. So for example, if the word was life, I would point to the L in the book and ask them, what's the beginning sound? Hopefully they would say, L, L, L. This strategy can also be used for the middle sounds, the last sounds, and just for breaking apart words into smaller chunks of sounds as well. It can be helpful to use blocks or bottle caps, checkers are good visual tools, just anything to demonstrate each of these letters has a sound. If you notice that the child's having trouble identifying words with the same sound, you can also try using a sorting game. You can print out pictures from online or take household items and have the child group them together by similar sounds. So in this example, you have the letter C, F, and D pasted on the top of the paper, and the child has pictures of things like corn, dinosaur, frog, and they have to figure out which letter represents the picture they see. So C makes a k, k, so they would look for maybe a picture of a cat or a cupcake or corn, and again, it's just a great way for them to visually see what the sound is. You can also use the blocks or your arm as a visual for how to stretch out the word and how to blend it. We call this an arm blender. By pointing to the different letters along your arm, your child will look at each letter and sound out as you move the blocks closer together or move your hand down your arm to demonstrate blending. The child will start to join the different sounds together. For example, if the word was hat, you would break it up into the 3 sounds, h, a, t. You would point to your shoulder and say h, point to your elbow and say a, and point to your wrist and say t. Again, pointing to your shoulder, you'd have the child say the sound at each of the different intervals of your arm. And then you would speed down your arm so the child could practice blending the sounds. So from ha, at, t, hat, by saying it faster. Now, if you know your child is familiar with a part of the word, what you can do is try covering up the part they don't know with your hand or a piece of paper and ask them to read the part of the word that's uncovered. So if the word was unable, I would cover up un and have the child try reading the word able. Showing the child that they know part of the word helps them build confidence and makes them realize that even if they can't decode the whole word, they at least know some of it. And when kids can start to recognize these common words and letter patterns, it makes reading a lot easier. Early readers might struggle with vowel sounds because they might get long vowel and short vowel sounds confused. If you notice the child says the long vowel version of the word, ask them to flip the vowel sound from long to short. Have them repeat both versions of the word and ask which sounds right to their ear. So you could say, is it elephant or elephant? Elephant, the short vowel sound, or elephant. And hopefully the kid can recognize that elephant, the short vowel, is the correct version of the word. The last tip for today has to do with robotic reading, or reading without fluency. Sometimes when kids are beginning to read, they read the words and the same tone, not pausing between words. This can make understanding the story difficult. A good tip is to model reading out loud to the child. You can practice reading the sentence in the correct fluency and have the child repeat. So that means proper expression, pauses, emphasis, and speed. Correct speed. Once you feel the child has a better sense of rhythmic reading, you can alternate reading sentences. So, to recap for today's weekly Parents Corner, reading should be fun, not a chore. So if you start to see your child getting frustrated, if you can't read a word, try some of these tips and strategies just to break up the monotony of just reading. And remember to please stay tuned for next week, and we'll talk about more strategies and games you can use with your kids while reading, like different craft projects you can do, board games, and different sort of tips you can implement in your reading strategies, like breaking up the amount of time you sit and read with your child. Instead of big chunks of time, instead of an hour, break it into 6 10-minute increments. That way the child doesn't get as bored or restless, but they still get the same amount of reading done. So we hope to continue to make learning and reading more fun for you and your child. And if you want to have any more strategies or tips, please stay tuned for next week. And you can also find more resources on our Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, which can all be found at Hawaii Literacy. Please like and subscribe to the video, and stay tuned for next week. Mahalo!